You're listening to Where You Live with Gene and Tony.
We are Gene and Tony. This is Where You Live. We're broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you by Extreme Exteriors and American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency. It's time now for a message from the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. The MHA Minute is brought to you by Pest Control Services. When you need an exterminator, you need someone reliable and effective. Call Greg Keener at Pest Control Services, 952-894-9748. Pest Control Services is a proud member of Angie's List and also a member of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. That's Pest Control Services, 952-894-9748. And tell Greg that Gene and Tony sent you.
Do you need products to successfully run your rental property business? Interested in a class about fair housing or rekeying locks? Want to use the plain language lease that is used by the majority of rental property owners in Minnesota? Then you should visit mmha.com. That's two M's, mmha.com. That's the website for the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, the most comprehensive resource in the state for owners of everything from a duplex to hundreds of units, and for townhome and condo associations as well. They've been around for 40 years and put on hundreds of seminars, publish a monthly magazine, sell Attorney General-approved leases, and have countless other tools for property owners. While they are a membership organization, all of their resources and seminars and their annual convention and their spring conference and their orientation programs are open to everyone. For more information, visit the website, mmha.com.
You know, I heard this week from one of our listeners, Margot. She met us at the State Fair last year.
Yep.
And she owns a townhouse in a homeowners association, and she's renting it. So she sent me an email with a list of questions about her rental. I think she's already has a tenant in there, and now she's turning over to a new tenant. So a whole new set of questions have arisen for her. One of the things she asked about was where can she get good lease forms? And we heard in that MHA Minute that the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association is a great place to get lease forms.
A great resource.
In fact, they're the best forms in the business, I think. They've all been tried in the market and tested by the Attorney General, and they're all approved. The other thing she asked about was late fees. She wanted to set a late fee policy. Apparently she hadn't in the past. And she wanted to know if that was collectible. If she sets this policy, can she actually collect the money? Or worst case scenario, can she collect it from the security deposit when they move out? And the answers to those questions are yes, 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 and yes. You can set a late fee policy. You can require that it be paid, and if it's not paid, it becomes part of the balance due when a renter moves out. Now, I advised her to make sure that her late fee policy was in her lease so that she's got it in writing.
That's the important issue.
That's very important. And also, in 2010, the Minnesota State Legislature put a cap on lease fees that can be charged by a landlord, and that cap is 8% of the rent amount. Per month. So you can't go above that. So if you start trying to calculate rent fees by the day, you may be going over that amount. You need to be careful when you're figuring out your policy.
Credit card companies they're not so much concerned with.
Oh
but
no. They get to do what they want. 22, 23, 25%, 30%.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
Well, let's talk about this story in Nevada here with collection costs. And what we have here is a primary case where investors who are now a good part of the market that are nabbing up foreclosed units.
They're the buyers that are out there looking.
In homeowner associations, renting them out themselves or turning around, fixing them up if the price is low enough, and reselling them to someone else who's going to occupy and own the unit. And what's interesting in this whole issue here, as we talked about, is here you have another group, again, going to the government saying, what can you do about this? What are you going to do to fix this?
Yeah.
And I wish we could agree as a society that we would realize that a limited government is probably in everybody's best interest.
Absolutely. I as you were saying that, I was just thinking there should be more room to negotiate for the buyer and the mortgage company and the seller, and the homeowners association is kind of outside of all that. People forget that the homeowners association is incurring costs, is losing money because of this abandoned unit that's going into foreclosure. That means everyone else in that neighborhood is having to pick up the slack.
Exactly.
They forget that part. It's not some landlord or some evil entity that's trying to gouge new buyers. They're trying to keep their head above water so they can pay the bills of the homeowners association.
And the new person who's going into that unit is going to have to be responsible for, along with all the other homeowners, for the outstanding debt that the association has. And
there you go. That's right.
And you make a very good point. Who are you really helping if someone doesn't take care of it at the time of the purchase? What you do is you hurt the association so many times, and they cannot raise the dues because of prohibitions with caps on percentages that are stated in their governing documents, or in homeowners who say, we can't have higher dues.
We can't afford higher dues.
We can't afford them. And so what ends up happening is more deferred maintenance, and you end up having a property that over in the long run is more run down and doesn't have the value there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I wish people would understand. There was, this saying that, those who do not know history are destined to repeat it. And I say that because...
True.
All you need to do is to take a look at the 1800s, during the time that there were what was called the robber barons.
Okay.
These are the people who were...
Are we talking about like James J. Hill and Rockefeller,
but not James J. Hill.
Oh, okay, all right.
But J.P. Morgan and others, yes, Carnegie. And let me make that distinction. Why I say not James
G. or J. Hill?
James J. Hill. Why not Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Commodore? Those guys were different. Most people thought anybody who made
a lot
piles
of money.
and piles of money did so, but a number of them, the robber barons, did so because they went to government and asked government to intervene. And so the reason they got rich is they went to the government and said...
And manipulated the rules.
Yes, they said, we want you, and that's what a lot of people in business have done. Instead of just trying to compete in the open market, they want to change the rules so that they have an advantage, and that advantage allows them to make more money for a period of time. And so they got, instead of allowing the railroads to just take place on their own, they were government subsidized. The government would give so much per mile of track. It was something like... I want to say $4,000 to $7,000 per mile on flat. And when you went through the mountains, you got $16,000.
So the government was subsidizing the construction of the railroad
a lot more, and so that ended up allowing people to make money. And here you have investors doing the same thing.
Yeah. What
was different about James J. Hill? He was what's called a free market baron. And so was the Commodore. What James J. Hill did in Minneapolis, and we should be proud of this, he went out along to that north route to farmers and people that had products, and he said, if I build a railroad track out to you, will you ship your product now to the East Coast where you have more people ready to buy? And they said, yes. And they got excited. And so everywhere James J. Hill built the railroad, people, other businesses, they developed and prospered. They got bigger than they ever had before because they had access to people.
They had a new market,
and other markets. And that happened on its own. That's what's the wonderful thing about supply and demand and the idea of a free market as opposed to government intervention.
Interesting.
And so if a lot of times we're so quick to want to say that these issues and problems that we have in housing and everything else, we want to turn to the government, to an agency, and then later we say, this wasn't any better.
In fact, it's often worse.
It is, because people don't think about what it is that they're doing because they don't have that knowledge, that understanding of the issue or problem. You referred to it earlier today. You said that there was no practice or practicality in reality, into the situation.
Yes.
And you hit the nail on the head with that.
I want to mention, I think the best solution that I have seen to help an association recoup its losses on an abandoned unit, the losses of lost assessments, the cost of collections, get that association to foreclose on that unit before the bank does, and start renting it and collecting rent for the association. It's been a great solution, and banks are so slow to foreclose that you often have several months. I have one unit that's been abandoned for 4 years, and the bank is just finally now looking at foreclosing.
You're right. It's a wonderful thing about self-reliance. And when an association becomes self-reliant and says, we're going to take our own destiny in our own hands, they come out ahead.
Yep.
Well, hey, that's all the time that we have on today's show. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. We look forward to having you here next Saturday morning on Where You Live with Gene and Tony.